Hey everyone, this is the Heroes podcast. I'm so happy to be back again with Helena Goto. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm glad to have you on this show, and because we have some very similar experiences in life. But before we go into your story, I'm going to intro you so everyone knows who we are meeting here today. So Helena is the founder of Goto Solutions consulting firm. She established it in 2013, specializing in conflict resolution, culture development, and effective communication. She has guided clients from both public and private sectors toward sustainable solutions. She has 2 master's degrees, and she's been a professor at USC. School of Public Policy. Wow, she's earned an MBA, University of Southern California. What? Yeah, so much qualifications. But let me welcome you here because what we want to know is how has it all started, Helena? If you want to take us back to the beginning, to tell us what were life like when you were young.
So I was born in New Zealand and had a very idyllic on a farm, like little lifestyle farm, lived just down the road from my grandparents, one older brother. I had little ponies and cats and birds and rabbits and guinea pigs. And then my parents got divorced. And that was a disaster when I was 12. Was I 11 going on 12, I think? But just a horrible time for a girl. And back in when were we? Like the 80s, um, there were not a lot of books and you couldn't Google how to divorce in a nice, amicable way. So it was done pretty brutally, to be honest. I feel like I lost both parents because my mum moved in with her boyfriend. We eventually moved out until I went to school, but she had a boyfriend that wasn't a fan of me, which I understand now that I have children. I understand it's hard to parent or like other people's children. So I'm not mad at him. And I was a very different personality. So there was that. And then my dad thinking, well, okay, well, he's got it. I guess my job is done here and checking out. So I just had this awful, I don't know, like experience as I was hitting puberty as a girl and really just felt horrible for many years, not realizing that it wasn't that there was anything wrong with me. It was that I was born into a country, a situation that I didn't really belong. And I won a trip on the radio to America and won a green card and ended up living in New York. And now I live in Los Angeles. But it wasn't until I arrived in New York City, thinking that I would meet someone on the plane who would have me stay with them, because that's how we were in New Zealand. And this is pre-internet. So I didn't even realize the trip was actually to LA that I won. But I thought that New York and LA, I had no concept because New Zealand's so small. I thought it was just right. Well, I'll pop to New York if I'm in LA. Anyway, so I arrived there, nowhere to stay, and had a really, I was sleeping on floors. I was like 2 days here, 2 days there. It was brutal. I cried every day, but but part of it was just like a relief as well. For the first time, feeling like I belonged. People just left me alone. I don't know, my energy in New Zealand, because I vibrate differently. I get a lot of like negative attention. And suddenly there was just either the attention was like, where are you from? What part of Europe is that? Because nobody knew, like the hobbits hadn't come out yet. So nobody knew about New Zealand. Do you live in a mud hut? Like there was just no idea about, never even like met a New Zealander, never heard anybody speak like I did. And I had this really strong, I know I still have a pretty strong accent, but I had a really strong accent. I couldn't even understand, like people couldn't understand me in New York. I couldn't understand people in New York. We're both speaking English, but anyway. So that was, I guess, how the foundation of my drive to help people feel like they belong, because I know how horrible, like how just devastating it is to everything when you feel like there's something wrong with you and you don't belong.
Helena, how old were you then? I was just wondering, you said you won a trip to New York, and it's so funny because 2 months ago I applied for a diversity visa for me and for my family to go to the US to do some gigs. But you said you just won this, and I was wondering, have you been in that horrible, you mentioned that was the word, from age 12, like how long would that take for you to win this trip, and what was in between? How have you felt, or did you still stay in contact with your parents? Do you want to just give us a bit more of a background of that?
So it was another 10 years, I guess. Uh, I mean, I think I came to America when I was 23. So my parents believed in education. At the time, I wanted to be a performer. I loved singing and I loved dancing. And to this day, I still love singing and dancing. It's like that. Just feel, even watching people sing and dance makes me want to cry. It just, so like Broadway shows. So I thought that that's what I wanted to do. And just to jump forward to a number of years of therapy, I got through a bunch of therapy and then I realized I really did not want to be an actor. It was just that I wanted to be seen. And then I kind of healed that piece of myself and that went away. And so, but I had to get a real degree. So I got a degree as a physical therapist. And so I went from being this singing, dancing, I love math and I loved English. And I ended up doing the science degree, which again, I really didn't fit in to that world. I ended up hating physiotherapy. It was just not me. So I did that. And then I started acting classes, and I started acting classes with this guy who was from New York, and which is why I ended up going to New York to go to acting school when I won the trip. So I feel like, yes, I still am in contact with my family. I still don't feel like I belong. I don't think that I'll ever do. I'll never be good enough. And that's like that's a difficult place to be, but at the same time, you know, I'm where I belong now.
Wow. So you still have an experience with your parents even to this day, that they are not. It was interesting, the word that you used. You said, I don't know how I ended up born in that country, New Zealand. Is that
Mm.
is that how you said it?
No, I found that I was born in a place that I didn't belong.
Yeah.
And because you talk to anybody and they're like, what, you're from New Zealand? What are you doing here? It's the most beautiful country in the world. And everybody, it's the best trip I ever took in my life. And so it's really hard to explain to people, well, it just, I don't know, I don't fit down there. And I can go and visit, but it's not, just who I am is just different. And even the music, I thought that I didn't like music because I was surrounded by AC/DC and Peter Frampton and Led Zeppelin. Like everyone was like stoned and listening to this music, and it's not who I am. Like yeah. It wasn't until I went to university and I came across like Boys to Men and this different kind of music. Oh, I like this. Oh, I do. It's different. Like it's just a different groove. And yeah, but I lived in such an insular little world that I didn't realize that until I kind of left home and ended up in America.
What a story. I mean, you might have heard that I did spend 6 or 7 years in New Zealand, and in the beginning I thought this is paradise. This is where I want to move to. It's the most wonderful place, and it is as far as scenery, but somehow I could not relate to maybe the energy, maybe it's the trauma that's been going on that piece of land, or two islands. I'm not too sure, but it's amazing how you have found the new home. What do you think has led you to the new version of you, if you could say that? I understand it was more so a transformation to work with the past and maybe let go that were all the things that might have been holding you back. But what were the tools? Like, who helped you? Did you have mentors, or what were the factors to find the new you?
Definitely mentors. Oh, absolutely. A number of very just strong women who I aspired to, who taught me things that I didn't know that I didn't know. But I think one of the key pieces for me is that I'm not very good at being uncomfortable. I don't have a high tolerance for being miserable. Like, that's why I'm good at what I do, because I'm like, okay, fine, let's this, we can't sit in this. This isn't working. This is a problem. Let's fix it. And I think I'm very much like that with myself, where it's always been this forward movement. And I think there was such a long way for me to go, that if I hadn't have had that constant, like, okay, I'm keeping on trying, keeping on trying, that I probably wouldn't have got to where I am. I would have just given up. But that just constant need to improve and really feel like I was being the best human, like becoming this person that I had something to give the world. I really felt like I've always wanted to give back. Like, I've always wanted to be kind and of service and helpful. And so to be that, you've kind of got to be good in yourself. So I was always striving. And I had one of my, like, I call her my sister, really. I've got a best friend for the last 24 years. And actually, that can't be right, because I haven't been here that long. No, I have been here that long, maybe 22 years. Anyway, and she was someone that was brought up with a very, very loving mother and father. And she just had such a strong sense of herself, and her reactions to things would be so different than mine. Like, if someone didn't like her, she'd be like, what's wrong with that person? Whereas me, I'd be like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Why don't you like me? What did I do? I'm a nice person. Right. And so I learned a lot by just thinking, well, what would Claire do? What would she do in this situation? And also, and then I also had a really incredible therapist for many years, Anne Nesbitt. And I would think, what would Anne want for me right now? Because I'd go to her and I'd tell her something, and she'd be like, that is awful. That's terrible. And I be like, really? So that definitely helped me. And then there was a woman called Beau Marie St. Clair, who was a producer here in LA. And she was someone that I looked up to. She's passed away. And I just aspired to be like her. She's such an incredible human being.
Would you say, looking back, you would be grateful for all that discomfort that has been coming
Yes.
your way to evolve? Like, there's good in the struggle.
I think that I'm like, I jumped 2 years of it, which sucks. And I wished it was a faster process, right? But I think I've got a philosophy now where all news is just news. It's good news, bad news. You really never know. And so, when you talk about how you get through this, and my brother and I joke around a lot about how we were so normal from, like, where we come from. We actually turned out relatively normal. And and so there's that. And then there's the next piece, and that is the ongoing challenges. So I had another phase, which was getting married and having 3 children back to back, and going through a real financial crisis, and a marriage crisis, and then going through that in a way of taking how everything that happened to me, or how I processed my parents' divorce and what I felt like I lost, and then doing it completely differently with my situation, has been incredibly healing, and I never would have been able to do it the way that I've done it if not for how my parents had done it. And then after that journey, going through the next one, which was a work crisis, like being in my dream job and having a toxic boss and understanding the impact that that has on a person. Like, I can see how everything has just built onto itself. And yes, I wish it had happened faster, because I feel like I'm like 15 years behind where I should be right now. And but I'm just going to try and stay healthy and live longer to make up for it.
Would you say the marriage crisis is something that you brought from the past? That's how it has a big reminder for you to work on yourself, or has that been almost coordinated for you, or how do you see it?
I think that I chose June, who is the father of my children, and I was married to for many years, because of wanting to be somebody's number one. I never ever had felt that in my life, and he gave that to me. I married him after 5 months. Like, I married him and got pregnant after 5 months because I'd found something. And to this day, he's still, the family is number one. I'm number one. And we are not together anymore. We still live under the same roof because we've got young, our kids are relatively young. But it's because this is his number one, the family. And I think I probably did pick him because of sensing that he was the kind of man that would be this way.
Who would
right?
feel the need that you could not have
Yeah.
earlier in life, right?
Yeah. And I think what happens is that you heal yourself, right? Like, I've got 3 boys, and I've been their number one. I won't be forever, but for many years, 3 little babies and your mom, and then June. So I feel like that piece of myself that needed to be seen and loved and good enough has been healed, and I don't need that. And now I need more. And some people come into adulthood already feeling seen and loved and good enough, and so don't need that phase. But and I think that we continue to grow, and what happens when you have children is that sometimes you just you kind of get stuck because you've grown out of that relationship. You didn't grow it the same, and the need sort of changes for your intimacy, but you're still parents. Like, that is never going away. And I think we don't have a really good way yet, particularly in America, is what I can speak to, of how to keep families together when marriages are over. We have a very dysfunctional, blow the family unit apart, devastate the family financially, and it just creates people stuck in really miserable marriages because they don't feel like they've got another option.
I'm thinking, might ask you this question. It just occurred to me. So I had this theory before in life that marriage as it is actually not suitable for the human race, because it's dedicated to one's life, to a life partner. And as we grow and change, then obviously if the other person is not on the same journey, then at one point we split, and that's where these massive cracks are happening, especially to children. And then later on in my life, I started to sort of see that maybe there is a soulmate, what they call the soulmate, who could evolve with us together. And then there is this uplifting experience if one is lucky and maybe arrived into the relationship quite mature and knowing what one wants. what is your take? Like, what are relationships and us in this human endeavor?
I think it's a way to grow as a human being. I think intimacy is so important to our health. And I think that I agree with finding that soulmate. However, most people are not born into this world in that. I mean, if you just look at statistically, how many of us meet that soulmate at 18, get married, have our kids, live our life together? It's kind of a fairy tale. And I think our conditioning to that fairy tale is very destructive. I think what's healthy is to have these relationships that allow you to grow and learn about yourself and grow and learn and keep doing that. And you know, if you're lucky, you come across someone who is, I think you come across exactly what you need. And if you don't heal it within that relationship, you get it in the next relationship. And but that being said, you can still heal it in that relationship and that person not be right for you anymore. Do you know what I mean? As you're growing. The kicker is the kids and the fact that we live so long. And so I can still love June, and I married him and had 3 children with him. He's the father of my children. Like, how toxic would I be to not still be able to love him? Right? I get it when there are people that are like evil, but most people are not evil. I get it. There's different situations, right, where someone's been abusive, and that just was not mine. And so it's such a privilege to be a parent and to get to do it with somebody else. It's such a team sport. And it is a time in your life. And I'm still in the middle of that. You know, I've got a 10, a 12, and a 13-year-old. If I had a 17, a 19, and a 20-year-old, I would be this would be different. But right now, as parents, this is what we believe is best for our children. So it's difficult to split those two things up. I think people with kids, and by the way, the stat on that is that when you're in a relationship with someone, it's 50%, like it's just as likely one or the other partner will end it. And when there are children involved, it's 70% of the time it's the woman.
Wow.
Question, like, what's different? And what's different is that marriage serves men more than it serves a woman. Because it's a miserable relationship, right? But it's easier to be in that as a man who traditionally. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but I think that's a very interesting statistic, because I think when women really empower themselves, and I see it around me all the time, women who feel they are not empowered to do what they want, what's best for them, like they don't feel like they can leave. They don't feel like they can see their kids 50% of the time. They don't feel like they have the finances to do it. They don't feel like they have the confidence to do it, you know? So for a woman to do it, you know, it's really bad.
Wow. For me, it was a big learning experience, because I went the other way. I did not find someone who filled that need, although yes, I connected with my partner, but for my wife now, but I have attracted my mirror, because she had similar challenges around self-worth, lack of confidence, not knowing who she is, direction. So I see these opposites playing up from time to time when previous patterns are matching to match people up, or quite the opposite, when there is a mirror effect type of learning takes place, and evolution, and yes, probably you're right, because my wife has asked the question, are we ready to divorce? And probably it has taken to the point where she didn't want to stay anymore because I was so lack of self-worth and confidence. But how are you now helping? Like, take us into your days. Are you working with businesses? Are you working with individuals? Because I see that you see a lot happening in relationships. So you still work with relationships with individuals, or you more so work with teams? Teach us.
So after having a very toxic work experience, being a strong person who's been through a lot and really being kind of taken down by this one really toxic manager, that even with all the education experience that I had, I was powerless. Like, this woman, she's still in the job. And since I left a year ago, 5 other people, she's devastated 5 other people, and they've left. And I wrote a letter to the CHRO and that's the head of human resources about this a year ago. Nothing's done. And so to experience that for myself, and also for the women that it was a team of women that I worked with, who I absolutely adore, still are friends with, and to see them going through it, it's really, I've brought it into my work. Just before this call, I was on with somebody and she was talking about, and so speaking of the work that I do, so typically I work with teams where a team's struggling. HR's like, well, we don't know what to do anymore. We're just getting constant complaints. We keep getting the turnover. Can you come and help us work this out? So I'll go in, meet with everybody, find out what's really going on, and then sort of like coach people through it, maybe facilitate a few conversations, and be there as just like as a guide to help people through it. And also, I am employed as a neutral third party to some companies. So it means that anybody can just reach out to me and be like, help me. I've got this manager. I'm trying to address this. Every time I do, I feel like she starts performance managing me, and I don't feel safe going to, you know what I mean? And I help that person individually. So that's how I do the work now. But I was just coaching someone before this, and she was saying, I am an anxious person, but I have never in my life been anxious like I am now. And she's got this one manager, someone new. She's like, I came out of a meeting crying. She's like, I'm not a crier, and I'm crying. And I was able to just say to her, I know how that feels. Like, I know when we're just waiting for the next shoe to drop, like to be blindsided by something, and it impacts your nervous system in a way that you don't realize the cumulative effect of being on edge like that. And she's like, yes, oh my God, I go home and my husband's like, are you okay? And I'm just like catatonic. So I think that taking that lesson of and it was a miserable lesson, oh my God, but taking that into the work that I do now has been really helpful. And it's good to be able to acknowledge, like, this is hard. And also, this is a job. Like, it's a job. You don't need to be here. You can go and get another job. And so I love that about, and again, it's my nature of like, don't sit in a cesspool, like, get out of it, move, do something. It might not be the final outcome, but at least it's some kind of movement. And I think that motivating, like, you can do it, is what I bring to the work.
Wow. I've seen so many people taking their jobs so seriously, as if, yeah, they gave away their identity to keep a boss happy, or to play by the rules. And there are some wounded people around workplaces and supervisors and managers that really need, I believe, skills to manage people. I hate the word manage. Is to be
Empower. It's about, a lot of these managers don't get the feedback that they need to be better. Nobody's trying to be a horrible manager. It's just there's a lack of safety in giving feedback. So as a manager, leader, being able to create an environment where people feel like they are safe enough to be honest about situations is, I think, the new, what has to be the new normal.
And do you see like colors of skin? Is there still an imbalance in the US? I'm not too sure why I asked the question, but I do hear that there's still discrimination, some discrimination from the old times. Is that true?
Yes, 100%. And the God, I mean, it's like that's a very deep, very, tricky place for a white woman to go. But what I see with when you're in an environment where it's not managed, like unconscious bias, like being able to have these conversations about that was an awkward thing to say. Did you mean to? Like whatever it is, being able to create that environment. If that doesn't exist, then it's incredibly difficult to be a minority because you are expected to just fit in, and fitting in is exhausting. And what happens is you fit in, and then when you finally can't fit in, you put up your hand and say, hey, that wasn't okay, like you can't blah, blah, blah. And then slowly you get managed out of there because the conversation, they can't have those. Then another token minority person gets put in that position and has to experience trying to fit in. And then eventually they're out. And then, and so the ongoing trauma for that individual who's popping around and being that token, the company is using it as their token, quota, as opposed to being in a company that has created an environment, a system that allows diverse thinking. It adjusts for the fact that we do have biases about people that look like us and sound like us. We like them more. It's just how our brains work. We're wired up a certain way. But if you've got an environment where you've got a manager who's able to create trust, that people feel like they can really truly say, hey, stop making comments about my pink jacket. Like, I like this jacket and I don't need to hear about it anymore. And the person being like, what? I don't understand what's wrong with your pink jacket? Why am I not allowed to say about your pink jacket? It's like, and actually being able to have that conversation one together and be like, oh God, no. Oh, I had no idea that I was microaggressing you. I never would want to do that. Okay, I got it. As opposed to going to HR and saying, because you don't have that safety, going to HR and creating that toxic loop of so-and-so said this and it made me feel like this and what, that whole thing. So trying to create those environments. And I think that there's very much a divide right now where there's a lot of these other environments where people are just tiptoeing around and trying to fit in. And the real push, and I think the real value and competitive advantage is by being able to create these environments where people feel like they actually belong, that they're treated like a human being. They're seen for what they bring to the table, and it being different what that person brings and that person brings is fantastic. And that kind of environment creates brilliant, is genius. What comes out of that?
What would you say the three biggest, and I know I'm very generic here, but what would be the three biggest biases that's been running? I'm thinking like, what's in my head, I'll share it with you. It's probably man, woman, probably men still earn more. And maybe color of skin would be probably level of trust or even income, the salaries. What are the biggest ones?
There's actually the Harvard Business Review. I think they have a test that you can go on and just do, and it's like it's your reaction time to putting man, leader, or masculine, things that would be a bias, and it shows where your biases are. And millions of people have done it. So I think there's actually probably, and I think that when you're saying the biggest biases, I think that they can change, and they can also change given what environment that you're in. You know, the bias in New Zealand towards certain things is probably different than the bias in America. And because, for example, African American people, I never even really knew an African American person when I was in New Zealand growing up. You know, and we didn't have a lot of TV. You know, we didn't have the internet. I was making myself sound really old, but so the foundation of my bias is going to be completely different than somebody who was brought up in America, you know, in Atlanta, say, who, whatever, had different wiring around those biases. So I think it is personally checking your bias. I think it's really, really sad when we default to them and just dismiss people because of something. One of the big ones that I deal with in the workplace is that women are emotional and unstable. And that's something that, you know, I coach constantly on managing that, calling it out. That's the key. It's like when there's a bias that you know you're triggering, let's say you're really young and you're in a room with a lot of very old, like people that are older, different generation, being able to call out, hey, yeah, I know you've all got your stories about the, you know, Z Gen or whatever it is, millennial, whatever it is. But I blah, 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 say a bunch of stuff that interrupts what that bias is going to be. And even though the person hasn't consciously been thinking that, the bias is in, you know, it's active, and you've interrupted it. So I don't know what the main ones are. I think what's relevant is what are the ones that are holding you back as an individual potentially, and how do you interrupt that? But also as a leader, as a human, what biases do you have that, you know, you're holding other people back because of your biases? There's a real bias right now in LA about being a white man, right? Like an older white man trying to get a job in Hollywood right now is very difficult. The bias around that is so it's like, and that wasn't there. That was not there 10 years ago. Not at all.
And where I'm just wondering, how do you draw the line in between you've got to, like, probably you're teaching people, especially women, you said, who are feeling emotional or maybe getting confronted with, well, behavior that's unwelcome. Do you have probably strategies for them to deal with situations, and then probably you then move on, leave the environment because it's just too tough? How did you, have you created specific methods about deciding which way to go, to try and fit in, or, you know, stand up for themselves and all of that and interrupt patterns, or literally just exit and move on?
I think that's very much it's very personal. And I think everybody has that moment. It's like that moment where like, can't do this anymore. I think people have it in their marriages. There's always that moment where you're like, I think I'm done. And that's it. And I think everybody has a different, I coach people to have it sooner than later. So they're not, because I think the longer you're in those dysfunctional places, the greater the negative impact it has on you as a human being.
Yeah.
But typically it's what can you control? Work on, you know, do all the things that you can control. And if you can't make changes, then you do what is in your control and you walk away. But I think those are two different things about, like, so if you're in an environment where people, like, they don't want to be, you know, they do want to be supportive, and they do want to be on that. Most people do. Like, if you actually give them the tools.
Yes,
So
yeah.
one of the tools that I say for women is, you know, if you're in a conversation, you find yourself, you got so excited about what you're talking about, you can then just go, listen, I know I'm very expressive right now. However, I just feel really passionate about what I'm talking about. So now I've taken my hysteria and rebranded it as passion. Okay, I can get on board with that, right?
That's a really good one. And I hope the audience can hear it and use it to have that refrain. So what's driving you now? If you look towards the future, what's inspiring you? What would be a cause to celebrate in 5 years' time?
I would, if I was to be able to have implemented this external employee relations center for care and accountability in companies. So if what I'm talking about is something that's being normalized in the business culture, that there is somebody available to be able to have these conversations and help people to work their way faster to, you know, a happy outcome. That would be, I would be beside myself. I think that it's so necessary now because of just what our workforce looks like and the state of the world, and the fact that people do feel exhausted, and that there's a lot, everyone's going through a lot, gone through a lot. And I think that really humanizing the workplace for people would really cause me to celebrate.
Wonderful. If someone wants to get in touch with you, what would be the easiest way? Obviously, we will have all your details under this video, but you have a website or social media?
Yeah, I do. I have, well, LinkedIn is obviously the easiest, and that's just Helena Goto. And then I have a website, which is, so my company is Goto Solutions, Inc. So it's Goto, GOTOS, Inc., INC.com. And that's my website. And so you can find me there, but really, and then my email is just helena@gotosinc.com.
Helena, what have I not asked you that would be really important to share in this interview that I have not specifically asked about?
Well, that's a great question. No idea. I think if there was a message, you know, to wrap it all up, it's keep going, you know, just keep going, keep breathing, keep taking deep breaths, and just keep going, because it does get better. It does get better. Even when it feels like it's not going to get better, it's going to get better.
Thanks very much for your time, Helena. It's been wonderful. And if there are any comments and questions, then we'll come through when this episode is released.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.